All right, thank you, everyone. Our very first conversation, big one on the program. Today, Nigeria is one country where we have talked time and again about the economy. As a matter of fact, issues around monetary and fiscal policy frameworks have been talking points for many years. Fast forward to when President Bola Tinubu took over office. During his inaugural speech, he had also talked about how that there would need to be what he called house cleaning around fiscal and monetary policy. Today, we have upped the ante a little. We're talking about the gross domestic product now, the GDP, and the need to rebase it. Now, experts say that there are reasons for this. One of them is say Nigeria, the last few years, has experienced a handful of instances of recession. Of course, that's not far fetched. Add to that, we have seen evolution across new sectors, existing sectors, continue to redefine themselves. And then we can't forget in a hurry as well how the impact, we should say, the adverse impact of COVID-19 redefined and reshaped economies across the world. Nigeria, not an exception. Today, the question is, why has it become so important and some people say imperative for government to, or if you like, the fiscal authorities to say, let's take a second look at the GDP and the need to rebase it. Well, we want to have that conversation in the next couple of minutes. I'm joined by Professor Biodun Adeniyi, a lecturer at the Base University, also a socio-political commentator. Prof, I would say Happy New Year to you officially.
Yeah, thank you. Same to you. It's a pleasure.
All right, so let's begin with the economy. The GDP rebasing. It's not the first time we've heard about this. Of course, in 2019, it was a big conversation with the former president and the former vice president, Muhammadu Buhari, and Professor Yemi Osinbajo. Today, we're back to that conversation, and the National Bureau of Statistics is big in the mix. What are we doing differently as against what we had seen the last few years?
I'm not sure we're doing anything differently. We're just trying to continue with a pattern. I think the NBA is also living up to his expectation as the body that's at the springboard of measuring the nation's economy, the capacity of the nation's economy at every point in time. GDP is supposed to be measured on a yearly, 2-yearly, 3-yearly, 4-yearly, or 5-yearly basis, depending on the choice of a country. Ours is usually 5 years, and you need to understand your GDP at every point in time to be able to know how your economy is performing in terms of the aggregate sum of consumption, distribution, and production. To help investment decision, whether local or foreign. Countries do this time after time. The United States is about to do its own. The last time we did that was about 5 years ago. Now we are making projections. Where we did it were like the top in Africa. Now we are set to be the 5th. But of course, we know there are other realities that have emerged within the Nigerian context. Digital economy has exploded. Pension funds is out there. The creative sector is also exploding. All these have to be captured. Yes, there's a controversial element of capturing illegalities. That's the controversial. We're not sure yet if MBS is going to calculate that. But even if they do, it's not going to be the first time because the United Kingdom did it in 2014. But be that as it may, it's important, and for us to understand, to know what our capacity is at the moment. We're just guessing. And if we are guessing, faced with new realities that are yet to be integrated into the GDP, it will help economic projections, and of course, investment decision.
Prof, as you know, many people don't seem to be very comfortable with conversations around data in Nigeria. They say Nigeria is not a country that is particularly reputable for being big on data. Most times when data is released, we have seen even by the NBS itself, not just by the World Bank or IMF, even the federal government finds a way to rail against it. So how are we going to deal with that in this instance?
Well, it's not unexpected, and it's not peculiar to Nigeria. Data can be controversial because it's a social activity, it's a social scientific activity, that is not necessarily cast in stone. It's not like the animate science. It goes through evaluation, and the evaluation are really necessarily done by humans. They can be subject to human frailties, But what we do in research and this kind of measurement is to try to be as close as possible to reality, to try to strive towards objectivity. Once you can assure that or guarantee that, with the right choice of methodologies, of techniques that you are adopting to arrive at your data, then you can be reasonably comfortable that you have done your best and allow for evaluation, as the case could be. So if we controvert it, it's not something that is necessarily extraordinary, but of course we need to have a figure to work with at every point in time in different respects, in different sectors, and the GDP is even a very, very significant one. The Nigerian case might be very peculiar, if we are controversing data, because sometimes these things, are steeped in political interpretations. And when there are political interpretations, it's about a multiplicity of interests, conflicting. Against that background, we respect differing opinions, but when those opinions are differing, we shouldn't detract from the bigger picture of the need to have some figures to work with.
There has always been this, if you like, a bit of a bout between Nigeria and South Africa. Maybe sometimes they add other countries like Egypt and Morocco in terms of who has the largest economy and all of that. Talk to our viewers, Prof, about how GDP elements is vital or pivotal to the size of an economy.
Yeah, it's actually a very important point that you raised. We are not supposed to be underperforming in Africa on account of our population. Nigeria is the largest black nation on planet Earth after Brazil. And of course, in Africa, no one is close to us. No country is close to us. So we're supposed to leverage our population to advance our economic prowess, just like China is doing, just like India is doing. Malaysia is doing it, Indonesia is doing it. So if they're able to do it, then why not us? And because of that, there's this naturally high expectation of Nigeria, and our ability to project our economy beyond any other country in Africa. But of course, we also know about the history of South Africa, and we know the dominance of capital in that country, and we know their possibilities, how they are very good players in international economic politics. So they have also leveraged on that, to emerge as maybe the first. Do not forget, Egypt is coming permanently on the rise. They are doing well. Egypt is higher than us now. Morocco is also on the rise, and of course Tunisia. These countries have successfully challenged us, but they have challenged us because we dropped the ball in many regards. Okay, in the last 5 years after the last rebasing, we dropped the ball at the level of mismanagement, pilfering of resources, exiting of companies, declining productivity in manufacturing, our inability to harness our potentials in steel development, insecurity, which has been affecting agricultural production. So all these sectors have been grossly affected, leading to the decline of our GDP. But of course, we also have new areas that have emerged. The digital economy, I mentioned it, the creative sector, I mentioned it, the pension fund, I mentioned it, and so many other sectors too that we can now integrate into the proposed rebasing, such that even though we did not emerge as first, our work will be somewhere maybe second and third, go up a little bit. But it is not so much about numbers, about first, second, third, or whatever. It is of no benefit really if we are first and we are not seeing the reflection of a big GDP in the economy, in the life of the people. What matters is how the GDP translates into improving the well-being of the people. That should be
quality of life.
The quality of life, that should be the focus really. And I want to believe that government is not lost on this, and that's why the MBS imagines that this is the right time to do it. It's not a one-off job from the way I understand it. It's something that has been they've been doing over the years, measuring it, deploying all techniques, the appropriate statistics, then of course to culminate into the eventual announcements, where all the pieces in the jigsaw have been properly fitted.
Again, Prof, there are people who will argue and say, I mean, rebasing the economy is just about measurement, determining metrics for measurements and nothing more. Let's talk about, if any, practical ways in which this sort of exercise or initiative helps to boost or drive economic growth.
Well, it does help, if you know the factors that contribute to the growth of a nation's GDP. We're talking about production, boom in production. We're talking about boom in consumption. Consumption means that an economy is reflated. And when an economy is reflated, multipliers are triggered. And when multipliers are triggered, the people are active, their earning power is enhanced, and their ability, to acquire goods and services is engendered. And of course, when all this is happening, this is adding up to the quality of their life. It means that employment is on the rise, disappointment is declining, disillusionment is also a decline, Simply, there's a reason why people want to go to the United States of America, for instance, because, production is high, manufacturing is sophisticated, and of course, steel development is wonderful. What about oil and gas sector? It's also booming. Particularly all sectors, are booming in the United States. That's why it's the #1 economy. And forget about the tantrums of Donald Trump. It still remains a world power when it comes to the economic prosperity, irrespective of the challenge of China. And if you go to China, look at production, look at manufacturing, look at their creativity, and see how saturated the local economy of China is, and that's why they are dominating the export world.
Right.
You know why? That's also why it is a destination for many transnational companies willing to outsource their subsidiaries. And of course, many companies, global companies, have subsidiaries, branches in China. Sometimes they even domicile their production network in that country, on account of their sophistication, at the level of availability of labor, at the level of innovation and initiative, and the opportunity, to be creative, with goods that they produce, So, and that's why the GDP of China is also very high. I can't remember the number now, but of course, GDP is a major pointer, to how you want to quantify all of these things put together. And sometimes, it also puts you on a better scale, better pedestal to welcome foreign investors, because there's an indicator to see, it's an indicator of how your economy is performing, and helps them to make decisions whether to come to a crime or not.
We're going to take a break shortly, but just before that, you mentioned the pensions funds a while ago. We've seen a lot of controversy around that, right from the days of Maina, for example. And then we've seen how that one day you hear that some chunk of the pensions funds has been invested in maybe the construction sector or some other very key sector, and so on and so forth. As of today, there's still a bit of, if you like, sway here and there around the pension system generally in Nigeria. You go to the digital economy that you mentioned, you go to the creative industry that you mentioned. Experts say most of these persons or these entities still operate within the informal space. In light of this move now to rebase the GDP, how do we also address that? It's pretty much like when you talk about the tax system in Nigeria. We say, we need to bring more people, more business into the tax net. But it has been more talk, less action or results.
Yeah, I agree with you. More talk, more pronouncement, less action. And it speaks to the bigger question of our deficiency in implementation, in execution of policies. But the fact that this is the case does not mean that it will remain the case or that we will not improve in the future. The pension culture was actually growing more under the Rebasing regime, and we have grown from then on. It was worse. When in life, right, when you have a challenge, you find a solution to it. That solution breeds another challenge. You also find a solution to it.
So the chain
continues, And of course, within the matrix, within the circumstance, there's a marginal improvement. The curve keeps going up if you keep the focus, towards stability and sustainability. That's how processes are, and that's how the pension industry also is. I'm not sure the kind of lack in control mechanism that we had in the Nina case is still present now.
Right.
We will have blocked it. I want to believe that it's been blocked, you know. The pension concept is a very good concept anywhere in the world. You know, when somebody works by 60, if you're not physically tired, you're probably emotionally tired, and you want to go and rest, and you want but going to rest does not mean you want to exit the world. There has to be ways in which you can survive. So the idea of pension is for you to prepare for your future, for old age, when you become incapacitated, probably, or when you become weak, probably, or when you become, you know, emotionally disadvantaged, probably. You know, so any of these life occurrences can be the case with any worker, and that's why it is preparatory, you know, to retirement, as the case could be. We may not be getting it right now, but I don't think we're doing badly and trying to improve on the structure, the institution of PENCOM,
right,
as the case could be.
All right, we're taking a quick break now, everyone. We're looking at rebasing the GDP, what exactly the government is doing in this regard and what the implications, short, medium, and long term for Nigeria. We're back shortly to continue with the discussion. Do stay with us. All right, so Prof, let's have the second lap of this conversation, right? Now we're talking GDP, and because the economy is dynamic, we're always going to have to measure from time to time, regardless of whether it's going to be on a yearly basis, 2-yearly basis, or whatever choice we make going forward. Diversification of the economy has been here for a while. Just yesterday, the Speaker of House of Representatives, Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, was saying that we actually made a fundamental mistake once we abandoned agriculture and migrated, as it were, to crude. Of course, that's a no-brainer. We've had that conversation for a few decades now. But be that as it may, what kind of conversation should we be having about diversification of our economy in light of this sort of exercise of rebasing the GDP from time to time?
Yeah, good question. I think if we do a rebasing, we know where we are strongest, you know, or where we are stronger as a nation, you know, in the sector that is most productive, right, most effective. And what we know, like you said, is a no-brainer, that is the oil and gas sector. But we move to the oil and gas sector because of mass predilection for the least option. Right? We were agriculturally productive before, but we found oil in in 1959, and one thing led to the other. It became the easiest option, you know, so we never looked back thereafter. Agriculture suffered, state development suffered, you know, custom and excise too, also suffered, and we lost, became a monocultural economy. But we know oil is also going through vagaries now, sometimes very volatile, sometimes, subject to new development. We are struggling to keep our identity as an oil producing country now, in view of new technologies of mobility, new technologies of doing things. We are stepping into the new world of artificial intelligence, and the challenge is now on us, not to be overly reliant on oil, and that's why I think that government is also trying to be sophisticated through the tax reform system. Remember, there are some countries in the world without oil, landlocked countries prospering. Jordan, landlocked, or relatively landlocked, but prospering. What about the United Kingdom? United Kingdom, it's a small country, but the bulk of its revenue comes from tourism. And near home here, Rwanda is landlocked. Why is it prospering? Why is there stability, irrespective of the questions that we ask around its democracy? It's because of tourism, And of course, Rwanda is a major destination now for Africa and even global migrants, people going for conferences and all of that. So diversification is not just, shouldn't just end at the level of pronouncement, but at the level of painstaking, but should continue at the level of painstaking efforts towards realizing it. We're a hugely well-resourced country, so many mineral resources available to us. The mining sector is a sector we didn't even mention, where we mentioned steel development and agriculture. What are we doing with our mining resources? They are being purified just like oil, oil theft and all of that. So our problem is largely about management and to a very large extent leadership. Oftentimes we cannot depart from the question of leadership. It's like the story that we tell in fairy tales those days that often ends, at the desk of the tortoise, So in this circumstance, leadership is like the tortoise. Every time we do analysis, it will end up at leadership. Because we know what leadership has been able to do in United Arab Emirates, for instance, what it is doing in Rwanda, and in historic terms we know what leadership did in the United Kingdom, in China, in Singapore, that we often like to mention, even in Saudi Arabia, deep into history. So leadership is critical, to the propelling of systems and societies to get things done properly. What about human resources? Apart from the huge size of our population, what about the sophistication of our people? Of course, these are exemplified in their performances anytime they exit this country. What they do over there, how much are we harnessing them? Other nations leverage on their diasporic resources, because apart from their physical experiences, and they're also exposed at the level of knowledge which they can transfer for the benefit of their origin, their homeland. India has done it, South Korea has done it, even Chile has done it. Ethiopia here does not joke with it. Then, even before we talk about the traditional classical diasporic community, the Jews, Israel has the return law, which encourage Jewish diasporic members to return home, and they are incentivized to come and invest in Israel. Yes, and largely you can see how prosperous that nation is at the level of innovation, at the level of science, because of government initiative, government motivation. These things are critical to development. It's not a stroll in the park. Efforts, we have to be intentional about these things, and intentionality does not come with one-off pronouncement, but consistency and keeping of the focus matters. But unfortunately, we are characterized with a system where leaders think that once in power, it should be for their benefit, and of course that's become really systemic, absolutely endemic, but not irredeemable.
When you talk about reducing the GDP, Prof, apparently you're having an economic conversation. Talking of the economy, Rwanda, its neighbor, in this case, Kenya, of course, is now saying that, look, we would allow Africans across these continents to come to our country visa-free, as against what they used to be. And people have looked at countries like Kenya, like Rwanda, to say it will appear the beacon in Africa, economically, socially, and otherwise, will likely be the eastern part of the continent, all right, the East Africa end, of course, these two countries being on the forefront and all of that. Should Nigeria, from what you see today, follow that model?
One is Nigeria should be a leader in Africa. Our population is a natural advantage, and I do not see how we cannot take initiative most of the time for other countries to follow. Let me tell you the major disappointment that many African countries have. When rather than they going to Europe or going to developing countries in Asia and the South Pacific, they should rather have been coming to Nigeria if we were serious. Because they see us as a big brother, and they're largely disappointed sometimes when we fail them. Imagine Nigeria, for instance, not having a national career. And of course, it's even Togo here, or is it in the Republic or Middle, that has ASCA, or that has an operational base for ASCA. It's Ethiopia, that has Ethiopian airline, there's Kenya Airways, there's Rwanda Air, but we don't have any, These things actually, they feel disappointed that we're not managing our system well, for them to help and idolize us, So, if they are leading the way in many respects, it's actually shameful, but at the same time, we're not supposed to break bones. What we're supposed to do is to look for ways out of it. And of course, you can see what Rwanda is doing. Most of the time, we go to Rwanda for training, for holidays and
conferences.
Conferences that become an alternative destination for Europe and the Americas, which is a kind of thing that Nigeria has the opportunity of offering the rest of Africa. But it comes back to the questions that we keep asking, the question of leadership. How do we get it right? And when we're talking about leadership, we shouldn't really be talking about leadership at the center, maybe at the presidential level. What about leadership at the sovereign, at the subnational, at the agency level? What are they doing? There can be exemplars. We have seen them in the past. These exemplars are more than enough, to lead others to the right path.
Let's begin to wrap up, Prof. Let's come back home. Ajaokuta steel. Yes, we've talked about the steel industry in Nigeria, what we can do with that alone, in addition to whatever we realize from oil, sale of crude and all of that. At the twilight of 2023, Vice President, Kashif Shettima had said that upon completion, amongst other benefits, that facility will be able to create a minimum of 500,000 jobs, and that's huge for just one sector. But this is more than 1 year and counting, not so much has been heard. When we were told that the original company, the company that originally set up that facility had been contracted again to say, let's reevaluate and see how we can get this thing back on the road. I think many Nigerians who understand the history of Ajaokuta Steel Complex thought they had a reason to heave a sigh of relief. When we look over our shoulder today, is there any hope in sight?
Well, it really comes back to managers, leaders, what they want to do for us. But if you look at the history of steel development, I think it goes back to the 14th, 15th, 16th century. And if you could travel to some of these developed countries, you see steel produced some 200, 300 years ago, still standing. You just marvel, and you simply be filled with regret where we have not been able to get things right, as a people. Because, excuse me, yes, if we say that we were enslaved, we were colonized, we are in the 21st century where we have the opportunity of benefiting from some of these countries, at least in contemporary times, just like Singapore has done, Malaysia has done, and just like China has also done, because at the point in time, we are at the same level of development with these countries, right? In the 60s, 70s, we're nearly at par with United Arab Emirates, So what do they do differently that we cannot do? And of course, Ajaokuta Steel development is a case in point. And if you travel to that place, you go to that place, you will, I don't want to use the word pity, you will just marvel, at how mindless we can be as a people, sinking that kind of humongous resources, into earth and not being able to earn resources, earn income from it. Huge investment. Russians did it in the 80s, in the late 70s, 80s, in the period of Shagari, and since then it's been one story after the other. But investigate deeply, it is one cycle of corruption after the other. So it remains a big elephant in the room. But we have to be serious about resolving. And how do we resolve it? There are mechanisms in place. We know the criminal justice system is anti-corruption, but it should go beyond apprehension, prosecution, and sanctioning, to the implementation of sanctions so that they can be deterrents. But in our situation, we have all these mechanisms, but they are implemented in the breach, and there's no commitment to implementation. In our system, we have a system where, instead of the law ruling, it is man that is ruling.
Right.
In the sense that, the bigger you are, the more likely you are going to escape, the hooks or in the law, but the lesser you are as a person, the more likely you are going to be entrapped. And of course, it shouldn't be so. The law should be advanced, such that everybody is equal within it. So when there are no sanctions, people just feel there shouldn't be any entrance, to committing infractions. Countries where sanctions are meted. China, the reward for corruption. There's no reason for you to be corrupt, and even if you want to try it, if you try it, you apprehend it. The repercussions. Singapore, what the repercussion is. Even the United States, that is a free society, we know how the law works. Yes, we know that in recent time with Trump, we've seen some kind of revision, but even then, the law is still strong.
Right.
Now, what point are we making here? We're simply saying that we probably also need to strengthen our institutions. Our institutions are weak, and of course they are there, they are in place, rightly so, but they are weak in terms of actualizing the mandates for which they were set, because institutions are the drivers of social systems, not human beings, If you leave social systems to the predilections, the peculiarities of humans alone, the whims and caprices, it will begin to flow left, right, and center without any intervention. But if systems work through the instruments of institutions, of course there will be order, right, and there will be succession, and there will be stability and sustainability of the case could be.
All right, Prof, let's wrap up from where we started from. Now we're talking rebasing the GDP. Every other country does the same. And you can't talk about the size of an economy without reference to the GDP of that country. We have not done this for a few years now. Obviously, we lagged. How do we ensure that we close that gap in such a way that we don't have to play, catch up?
Well, just to be consistent, we're not doing badly in terms of some innovation. The young population is actually doing well, right? They are burgeoning. Remembering that we are a nation of over 200 million people. Most of them are young people. They are very innovative. They are taking advantage of the new media, new technologies of doing things, artificial intelligence, the creative economy is booming as a result of new technologies. So this is also generating economic activity, leading to increase production, distribution, and consumption. And these are things that boost a nation's economy. So I don't see us going backward in that regard. It's going to continue, because technologies of doing things, have always been the progressive side, even from the time of the telegraph. You imagine how we have moved from the telegraph to where we are now, right? To so it's going to continue,
right?
And of course, if it continues, we cannot be excluded from that matrix. The young ones are also there to continue to provide leadership in this field. Out of 9 unicorns in the world, we have about 4 or 5 in Nigeria. That's a major statement, So the digital economy is also there. The pension fund that was mentioned is also there. So there will be continuity in this regard. And that's why, again, people make the argument that what government needs to do is to create a movement environment for the private sector to thrive. Because the private sectors are usually drivers of a nation's economy. Even nations that that had command economies in those days, nations of the East, Russia, China, they have liberalized. We saw what liberation did to China. Apart from the rise of billionaires, we also see how industries have burgeoned. What about Russia too? Apart from the rise of billionaires, we have seen how they are progressing. Even though also enabling them to face multiple sanctions. from the West. Of course, liberalization is helpful to this, and how do you guarantee liberalization? By encouraging the thriving of the private sector. And how do you do this? Creating a liberal environment, ensuring that your tax system is not stifling, ensuring there's security, having policies, antitrust policies protecting